Hello and welcome back to Stop and Go F1 for this, our reaction to the Canadian Grand Prix. And if the Monaco Grand Prix was the worst race we've ever seen in our entire lives, then the Canadian Grand Prix, for me, is easily the best race we've had this year, and I think will take a lot to beat it. That was absolutely fantastic. I'll get into all of it right now. Before we do, though, make sure you like and subscribe, because let's go from the top. It's George Russell on pole, Max Verstappen alongside. As for the rest of the grid, the changes are Ocon is now at the back because he had the 5-place grid penalty from the crash in Monaco with Gasly, and both Bottas and Zhou are starting from the pit lane. The Sauber's changing their setup to a wet setup because it is a wet one. The rain coming down just before the start of the race, although it had been raining all day in Canada. If you see some highlights of the Porsche Super Cup, there were some big crashes there today just due to how heavy the rain was coming down. Now, Ocon's car was in trouble before the race even began. The mechanics were frantically working on it. It was touch and go as to if that was actually going to start the race, but they do manage to get it out there, and that is fine. The interesting one is the tyres, because everyone is on Inters apart from the Hasses. Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg going for the full wet tyres. Now, initially, I thought this was a mistake. How wrong I was. Lights out and away we go, and it's an incredibly slow start for everyone. No grip at all on the grid as everyone gets away very, very, very slowly. George Russell is able to keep the lead, but the action is further down the grid because the wets are working incredibly. In one lap, Kevin Magnussen moved up 6 places. Nico Hülkenberg moved up 4 places. By the end of lap 2, Magnussen, who started 14th, was 5th. By the end of lap 3, he was 4th. He was 1.6 seconds quicker than George Russell on lap 5 when George Russell was leading the race. At this point, I'm sat there going, oh my god, Haas are going to win. Haas are going to actually win the Canadian Grand Prix. Further back, big issues with Charles Leclerc. He's got some kind of engine issue, losing a lot of speed on the straights. About half a second they're saying he was losing on the straights due to this engine issue. There's an incredible battle for 6th place between Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton. That lasts the majority of the race, and it's around about this time that the crossover happens in terms of the wets no longer being the fastest tyre and the intermediates being the fastest. Kevin Magnussen comes in from 4th place, a wonderful position for Haas. The best position Haas have been in, possibly ever, or since Magnussen got that pole position. He comes in to swap over to the Inters, and the tyres weren't ready, which makes me think that maybe Magnussen called it last minute to dive in. The pit stop was 8.6 seconds. He went from 4th to 13th. I mean, he would have dropped places anyway, but looking at the times, he realistically should have come out around about 10th place, so still in the points, but he was down to 13th, I think a lap later he was 14th. So Magnussen, great strategy call from Haas in terms of going on the wet tyres, but in the end, wasted, really, because of that slow pit stop. Now, on the first lap, we get a replay now of Gasly and Perez, because Perez tapped the rear end of Gasly into turn 1 and lost a bit of his front wing. It was a racing incident, but he did have a bit of damage from there. Ricciardo was noted for a false start, and he would get a penalty for this. Looking at the replay, I didn't see it. But, you know, ever since Saudi Arabia and Norris's false start that was a false start but wasn't a false start, the rule is if you're ruled as a false start, it's a false start. From the replay, I didn't think it was, but apparently the data says that it was, so Ricciardo gets a penalty from that. Nico Hülkenberg is still on the wets now and is massively, massively off the pace. He is 13 seconds off the back of Lewis Hamilton, and it's causing a huge train. Now, initially, I thought maybe he was trying to return the favour to Magnussen. Now, we've seen many times before, when Hulkenberg's in a good place, Magnussen kind of causes the traffic to back up a little bit. I thought maybe he was trying to cause the traffic to back up a little bit so Magnussen could catch the back of the train. But no, Hulkenberg did pit on lap 13. They just let him out. They left him out far too late. Verstappen is now closing in on George Russell as rain is expecting to hit the track again very soon. By lap 15, Max is all over the back of him. The track at this point very dry. A definite dry line in terms of the racing line. So the driver's going off the racing line to gather that water on the tyres to try and cool them down. And it's at the point here where they really want to pit for those dry tyres. But with the rain being forecasted as hitting imminently, if you pit for dries, you're going to have to pit again. So they're just trying to make these inters last as long as they can to make sure they get into the next rain cycle and see where they can go from there. Lando Norris, though, now, who'd been a bit anonymous in third place up until this point, starts putting in fastest lap times and catching up with Russell and Verstappen. This is when Max Verstappen makes a mistake into turn 1 and Lando Norris is now all over the back of him. Now, for the last few laps, Verstappen has been asking, can DRS be enabled because he's on the back of Russell? And DRS is enabled now that he's not on the back of Russell and Norris is on the back of him. There's a great little battle between them for P2, some great defending from Max Verstappen. Meanwhile, the way they managed to do this was fantastic because they were fighting each other while still, both of them, gaining on Russell, which was just great to see. Norris does get past Verstappen for P2 on lap 20, and then he is all over the back of George Russell pretty much instantly, and on the same lap takes the lead of the race. George Russell then skips the chicane, the final chicane, comes back onto the track, nearly hits Max Verstappen, but Max is able to dodge it and take P2 for himself. Norris is super quick now and is just building up a massive lead in first place. The Hamilton-Alonso battle is still continuing with Alonso in the lead. Great driving from both of them. And now Piastri, who's also been a bit anonymous up until this point, like Norris had been, he is now on the back of Russell as well. The McLaren starting to show their speed as the track dries out. Now, Sargent is in the wall. This is lap 25. He has a spin just on the exit of the first chicane. Was that the first chicane? I wouldn't say that first corner is a chicane. So yeah, the first chicane has a spin, taps the wall, and he is out. This brings out the safety car, but importantly, the safety car comes out after Lando Norris has passed the pit entry. So there's a few people pitting here. Zhou pits from last place, but Verstappen, Russell and Piastri all pit as well for fresh inters. The Alonso-Hamilton battle comes into the pit lane as well, and Hamilton gets a much quicker pit stop than Alonso, who had a pretty bad one, to be fair. I think it was like a 5-second pit stop. Due to this, Hamilton is able to jump Alonso in the pit lane, and really from there, Alonso was never able to catch the back of Hamilton again for the rest of the race. Lando Norris does pit for the inters, but importantly, a lap later, and has to go behind the safety car for an entire lap. Due to this, Max Verstappen is able to take the lead of the race, Lando Norris having to settle for P3 after that pit stop because Russell jumped him as well, which means we are now on to our third different leader of this race. An incredible race it was. Safety car ends on lap 30. Now, just before the safety car comes in, Ferrari do something which I would associate with Ferrari of a few years ago, not Ferrari of today. So it is called that the safety car is ending. This is when Ferrari decide to pull Leclerc into the pits, and they pit him for the hards. They then turn his engine, his car, on and off again to try and fix that issue he's been suffering with, which it does fix it, and he goes back out again as the safety car is coming in. There are a myriad of things wrong with this decision. So, why are you calling him into the pits on the last lap of the safety car? Now, you could say, oh, they didn't know that was the last lap of the safety car. But if you're going to call him in on lap 30, why not call him in on lap 26? That just makes a hell of a lot more sense. Because what they really did here is they pitted him and he didn't gain the advantage of pitting under safety car because it was just that quick. He never caught the back of the pack and couldn't go from there. Going on to hards, I kind of get it. Kind of. Because, the track was drying up. He was in a bad position. I think he was like 11th or 12th at this point. Why not go for a risk? I get that. But everyone is predicting rain is coming imminently. They say, the rain's only going to be here for 2 laps or so. But even still, it's a risk that isn't worth taking. If they're going to do it, if they're going to do this, they should have done it like 4 laps earlier. Turning the car on and off, obviously that worked. Great idea, because that helped out. But this was the downfall of Charles Leclerc's race. I know, obviously, qualifying wasn't great, and he hadn't made much movement up until this point, but this is the huge mistake that ruined everything. He should have pitted 4 laps earlier. He should have pitted for the inters, and maybe he could have been somewhere, because if you're going to have a slow stop anyway, just stop straight away. This was so stupid for me here. I just did not understand it whatsoever. Anyway, the safety car comes in on lap 30. Max Verstappen properly backs up the pack and is able to keep the lead and gains a 1.5 second gap pretty quickly on there. Leclerc is going so slow on the hard tyres. On lap 31, he had a 42 second gap to Zhou Guanyu, who was the next car ahead of him. By lap 32, that gap was 1 minute and 5 seconds. For some reason at this point, Crofty was still going, well, if it dries up, he's got the advantage. No, he doesn't. If you have a 1 minute 5 second gap to the car ahead of you, they can pit 3 times and still be ahead of you. This was a bad call all around. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the track, Albon has a beautiful double overtake on Ricciardo and Ocon. Goes round the outside of one, onto the inside of the other. That's for P9. Great stuff from Albon, who always does pretty well on this track. Leclerc pits again on lap 33 for the Inters. Further back, Sainz has tapped the back of Valtteri Bottas' car, loses the front wing end plate. The bad day for Ferrari gets worse, and it will get worse again. On lap 40, DRS is enabled. Lewis Hamilton is the fastest man on track. He's half a second off the back of Piastri at this point, after having got past Alonso through the pit stop. Gasly on lap 41 pits for the hards, the first person to pit for dry tyres when it's reasonably dry. Norris locks up into turn 1 and keeps his position. This is when some people now start to make the move onto hards. They've seen what Gasly has done. Magnussen pits on lap 42. Hamilton pits on lap 44. Both of those for the mediums. We get Ricciardo in and Sainz and Perez for the mediums as well. On lap 45, it's Piastri, Albon, Yuki, Stroll, Ocon, Hülkenberg, and Zhou and Alonso. They're all pitting for the mediums as well. Something to point out as well here is that Ocon and Yuki, and I think someone else as well, they ran the Inters all the way up until this point. Whilst everyone else was competing on 2 sets of Inters, they competed on 1. Great job from both of those. Leclerc pits, but this is to retire the car. Ferrari just gave up here at this point, and I can understand why. They were so far off the back of the pack. Yes, they could have stayed out and hoped for another safety car to come out, but it's probably better for them to save the engine, because I don't really see that. Even if they'd stayed out, I don't think they would have gotten the points from here, because it just was not going their way today. Now, here's something interesting. On lap 46, this is when the leaders decide to come in. Verstappen pits from the lead, Russell pits from P2, but Norris stays out on Inters. Russell's on the hard, Verstappen's on the mediums, Norris on Inters. That's our top 3 at this point in the race. Norris then goes another lap and then comes in on lap 47 for mediums. Stays out a couple laps longer than everyone else. Norris takes the lead through the pit stops, but coming out of the pit lane, he goes through a bit of a wet part of the track, can't get any traction, goes sideways a little bit, and Verstappen is able to take the lead from there. But Lando does get the jump on George Russell, so he's now up into P2, but not for long, because Russell comes back and overtakes Lando for P2 on lap 49. Russell now in a good position, cutting down Verstappen's lead in front of Lando Norris when he makes a huge mistake going just before the start of the third sector. Cuts the grass. Lando takes P2 back on lap 51. And this is just one of many, many mistakes George Russell made today. This was overall, George Russell today, when you look at his results, on paper, had a great weekend. But it could have been so much better. Russell should have won this weekend, but there were so many mistakes he made that cost him, and really he's got no one else to blame but himself for that. And also, it's the first time, I think ever, that Sky Sports questioned, does George Russell make too many mistakes? Which is a conversation that I've been having on here for a while, and I think a lot of fans have been having for a while, but the first time that Sky had really picked up on it and gone, he's really cost himself something here, because he had. Meanwhile, someone else who's cost himself something is Sergio Perez, because his rear wings collapsed. This is on lap 53 now. He retires the car. The replay reveals that he has had a big spin and hit the wall. An awful, awful weekend for Sergio Perez. Meanwhile, though, the weekend for Ferrari gets worse because Sainz has now had a spin, collected Alex Albon in the spin, and both Albon and Sainz are now out. This brings out the safety car. I did see someone on Twitter say, I wonder how James Vowles feels about Carlos Sainz right now after he's taken out Alex Albon. Probably not too good. Under the safety car, Mercedes do a double stop on lap 55. Hamilton now on the hards, Russell on the mediums. Sainz retires the car into the pits. He was able to keep going for a little bit, but he did have rear wing damage from when he hit Albon. I was wondering if this is going to be a penalty or not. Personally, I feel it would be a bit harsh. Because I know obviously it was Sainz's fault that he did the spin, but once the spin had happened, he was very much out of control of the car, and I don't think he could have avoided Albon if he tried, really. We'll have to wait and see on that one. I feel there is a move later on, which is more likely to get a penalty than that one with Sainz. Back to the front of the grid, though, the safety car comes in on lap 59 of 70, 11 laps to go. Verstappen backs up the pack once again, and a good restart. He has over a second lead after turn 3 on the restart. So great stuff from Verstappen, controlling the safety car queue from there. It is now, because Russell pitted with that Mercedes double stop, it is Verstappen, Norris, Piastri in P3. Russell is all over the back of Piastri on lap 62, but Piastri is able to keep the place for now. On the next lap, Russell goes for it again. He hits Piastri, cuts the corner, and loses a place to Lewis Hamilton. Now, I think, personally, that could be worth a penalty. I don't think he will get one, but I could see them saying that's a penalty because he really has sandwiched Piastri between the wall and himself. There was arguments of, was Russell more ahead? And he was ahead, but he still did not leave enough room for me. And I could see that eventually becoming a penalty and maybe Lewis Hamilton inheriting that P3. Anyway, Hamilton is now on the back of Piastri. Now that Russell has got out of the way, and Hamilton is able to pass Piastri with P3 on lap 66. Russell then passes Piastri on the same lap. Yuki Tsunoda, who's had a fantastic race up until this point, has a huge spin, collects a bollard with him, nearly collects a Haas. It was great awareness from Nico Hülkenberg for his race not to end right there, because that was a close one for him. Yuki, though, spinning from P9 to P14, and it had been a great race for him up until that point. You know, staying out on the Inters for as long as he did, managing it really well. He was, as I said, P9 with Ocon ahead. He was fighting for those points there, unfortunately threw it away. On lap 68 of 70, Russell passes Hamilton for P3. It is all elbows out at Mercedes. The radio message comes over, you are free to fight. I think that surprised nobody, you know, considering Hamilton is leaving. They're not going to say, Lewis, you get to keep the position. So I wasn't shocked at all that Mercedes let them fight. Hamilton looked to maybe make a move on the last lap, but didn't have the speed. As we cross the line, Max Verstappen takes the win, Norris P2, Russell in P3, Hamilton was 4th, Piastri 5th, Alonso 6th, Stroll in 7th, Ricciardo 8th, Gasly 9th, Ocon 10th, They were the points finishers. Hulkenberg 11th, Magnussen 12th, 13th for Bottas, 14th for Yuki, 15th for Zhou. Then the DNFs were Sainz, Albon, Perez, Leclerc and Sargent. A fantastic race. I believe it was Max Verstappen's 60th win. He's got quite a gap at the top of the championship now. I still do think we have a championship on our hands here. But yeah, a great win from Max there. Some real fantastic drives up and down the grid. I think we spoke about it yesterday in the qualifying video of the Max Verstappen effect in terms of the car today, the Red Bull, was not the best. Max even complaining of a suspension issue basically from the end of the second safety car through to the end of the race. But he was still able to take that win. You know, we saw Perez, not only did he have a bad qualifying, he was nowhere in the race. Even when he's challenging the likes of the Saubers and the Williams and the Haas, he was still nowhere, and then he crashed the car. So then Verstappen, to be managing to challenge all these guys, the McLaren and the Mercedes were far faster, I feel, than the Red Bull was today, and he still manages to win. That is show. I think that's one of his greatest wins. He did a fantastic job today. Norris as well in second place did a fantastic job to manage that all the way through. Russell, as I said, on paper, great result, but could have been so much better. You know, with the mistake across the grass that cost him P2 against Lando, to then get that back and then, you know, to hit Piastri as well. There's a few moments where you look at him and go, you should have done better than that. That move where he hit Piastri, that cost him so much time. Realistically, if he'd been maybe a bit more patient, he could have finished P2 if not for that. And he does make those kinds of little silly mistakes quite often. And, you know, once again, could that penalty be coming for him? I don't think it will be, but you never know. Lewis Hamilton in fourth will be very happy with that. I wasn't too impressed with his qualifying yesterday, but a fantastic recovery from him. And you got to say, he's probably the faster of the two Mercedes. To go from 7th to 4th, realistically, could have been on the podium. Great drive from Lewis Hamilton. Oscar Piastri in 5th. Yes, again, with Piastri, it's a very, very good drive for him. But it's those kinds of races today where it shows that Piastri is not yet on the level of those top guys. I'm sure he will be on that level at some point. But as of right now, he's not quite there. But, you know, he's getting there for sure. A great day for the Aston lads. Alonso and Stroll. Alonso 6th, Stroll 7th. Great points for them. Ricciardo, fantastic weekend in P8, proving Jacques Villeneuve wrong. I was supposed to say this in the qualifying video, and I forgot to say it. But I think the critique of Jacques Villeneuve is very misplaced. And if anyone's going to say that, any former driver is going to say that, you know, just because you had a few good seasons before doesn't mean you can stick around forever. It should not be Jacques Villeneuve who turned 2 good seasons into a 10-year career. So, Jacques Villeneuve, you can do one, because Ricciardo did very well this weekend. But someone who did even better is the Alpine lads. 9th and 10th, great double points finish for Alpine. When you compare where they were at the start of the year to where they are now, this is incredible from Alpine. They are now higher in the championship than Williams are as well. So they're beating Sauber and Williams at the minute. Great job from both of them. Underrated will go to Hulkenberg and Magnussen, who despite finishing outside the points, great result from both of them. You know, that start of the race, you know, they've got to be so brave to be overtaking in the manner that they did, and the speed that they did, with the lack of visibility. Fantastic from both of them. Just to miss out on points there, you've got to wonder what would happen if Magnussen's pit stop didn't go wrong, if they'd called in Hulkenberg a bit earlier. I think Haas, you know, this is the thing with Haas. They have these moments of brilliance, but they can't be consistently brilliant throughout an entire race, and that's what cost them here. Realistically, they should have beaten the Alpines. They should have beaten Ricciardo. Who knows, maybe they could have even got onto the back of the Astons, and that's not the fault of the drivers. That's the fault of the strategy that they deemed there. Bottas, another great job from Bottas. I've said this before about Bottas, but when you look at the championship, him and Zhou are obviously on the same points. They both have 0. But Bottas has had a million times better season than Zhou has. Zhou has been dreadful this year, and it's going unnoticed how dreadful Zhou has been. But Bottas is the complete opposite. Absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, only 13th. Yuki Tsunoda, great job from him until the end. Much like Haas, very good, and then just missing out. And then Zhou, once again, was the last of the finishers in P15. DNFs, as I said, Sainz, Albon, Perez, Leclerc, and Sargent. And, out of those lot, the only ones you can really feel sorry for are Leclerc and Albon. Wasn't realistically their fault for those DNFs. So there you go. That is the Canadian Grand Prix. Absolutely fantastic. Back tomorrow for driver ratings. And we're back in 2 weeks' time for the Spanish Grand Prix, which is going to be a mega weekend. Not only F1, not only F2, not only F3, but also F1 Academy. A load of content to come over the Spanish Grand Prix weekend. There will be a video out on the channel as well on Friday, so make sure to subscribe for that. My goodness, there it was. The Canadian Grand Prix, the best race we've had this year by a mile. I hope you had a good one. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, goodbye.